All right, everyone, get ready. We've got a ton of information here about what the FCA wants to see from payment portfolio firms, and I gotta say, it's a lot to process.
Yeah, no kidding. We've got letters, reports, guides. It's enough to make your head spin.
But that's why we're here, right? We've sifted through it all, and today we're gonna break it down and find the really important stuff, kind of like a deep dive into the heart of all these FCA documents.
Exactly. The FCA's made it pretty clear what their vision for this sector is, and the impact on firms is going to be pretty big, let me tell you.
So let's get our listeners up to speed. We've got these letters straight from the FCA to CEOs, laying out their priorities, a whole analysis of how payment firms are handling that consumer duty thing, and some serious updates to their financial crime guide. What's the big picture here?
Well, what really stands out to me is how much the FCA is pushing for a total change in culture. Like, it's not just about following the rules anymore, it's about putting the customer at the center of everything.
So it's more about a real change in how they do business
Yeah.
than just checking boxes.
That's it. And all of this actually comes from something bigger. You know, the UK government's national payments vision.
Right, right. So how does that fit in with what the FCA is doing?
Well, the FCA's priorities are totally in line with that vision of making a world-leading payment system here in the UK. Think about it. Trust, innovation, security, all wrapped up in one. And to get there, the FCA has three main outcomes they want to see from payment firms.
Okay, let's hear them. What's the first one they're aiming for?
First up, they want to see good, healthy competition and innovation that actually helps customers. And they're not just talking about it. Look at what they're doing with open banking and open finance. It shows they really want to encourage innovation in this industry.
Yeah, open banking's been a game changer, giving people more control over their financial stuff. What's the next outcome on their list?
Number two is all about keeping the whole financial system safe and sound. That means cracking down on financial crime and making sure the payment system can handle anything that comes its way.
Like building a fortress to protect everybody involved.
Exactly. A system that's built on trust is super important for businesses and people alike. All right, what about the third outcome?
Lay it on us.
The third one focuses on the most important thing, protecting people's money. The FCA wants to see these firms handling money responsibly and keeping it safe, especially after some of those high-profile cases where people's funds were at risk.
Makes sense. Got to build that confidence and show the system secure. Now, one thing that jumps out from all these documents is how much they're talking about good governance. It's obviously a big deal for the FCA.
You hit the nail on the head there. Strong governance is like the foundation for everything else. You need the right structures in place, and you need to make sure they're actually working well.
And it's not like the FCA is just saying, do better. They've actually given some pretty specific advice in their Dear CEO letter, 6 steps that firms should take to get their governance in shape.
Absolutely. They're really walking the walk here, giving practical advice instead of just vague instructions. It shows they're serious about helping firms get this right.
So should we take a closer look at those 6 steps?
Yeah, let's break them down one by one so everyone listening can really grasp what the FCA is looking for.
Perfect. So what's the first step on this governance journey?
Okay, step one is about improving the systems and arrangements they already have for governance. Making sure those reporting lines are strong, control systems are tough enough to handle any risks, and everything's appropriate for the size and activities of the firm. Oh, and the FCA is also really highlighting the importance of non-executive directors. They say they have a key role in keeping things on track and questioning decisions.
So it's about having checks and balances, right?
Yeah.
With people held accountable at every level.
Right. Okay, moving on to step two, they're talking about keeping a much closer watch on agents and distributors. The FCA wants firms to be proactive about monitoring these partners and making sure they're meeting the requirements. And if they're not, they need to step in and fix things quickly, holding everyone accountable.
It sounds like this ties in with the FCA's focus on a strong UK presence, especially for firms working internationally. They're suggesting having key leadership and operations based in the UK.
You got it. Having that UK presence probably makes it easier for the FCA to monitor what's going on, enforce their rules, and keep the financial system strong. Plus, it adds another layer of protection against financial crime.
Makes sense. Okay, what's the next step on the list?
Step three dives into the world of outsourced functions, which can be a bit of a headache. The FCA is basically saying, get a grip on those third-party providers. They want firms to manage those relationships carefully and make sure those outsourced functions are staying compliant. They even specifically mention SYSC 8 in their handbook, which is all about outsourcing, just to really drive the point home.
So keeping control and making sure everyone's accountable, even when you're working with outside partners. What's step 4 all about?
This one builds on that UK presence idea we talked about. They're stressing the need for strong leadership, and they want those key decision makers to be based right here in the UK, following UK governance rules, especially for firms operating globally.
So it's not just about having a symbolic presence in the UK. The FCA wants to see real commitment to UK operations.
Absolutely. Okay, step 5 is all about hybrid business models, which are getting more and more common. Basically, the FCA is saying that firms operating across different countries need to have really strong governance in place. It's about recognizing that these models can be tricky and putting in extra controls to manage the risks that come with them.
No hiding behind complicated structures or loopholes. What's the final step?
The last one is about keeping up with all the changes and regulations. The FCA expects firms to actively participate in consultations and adjust their operations as the rules change.
That proactive approach again. They want firms to anticipate and adapt, not just react.
Exactly. That proactive attitude really shows how committed a firm is to good governance. The FCA wants to see firms that are engaged, informed, and ready to change with the times.
It sounds like they're sending a very clear message. Strong governance is non-negotiable.
No doubt about it. They see it as the key to achieving their bigger goals of protecting customers, keeping the financial system stable, and encouraging innovation.
And they're not just talking the talk. They're giving real, practical guidance on how firms can make it happen. Like recommending a UK head office where the top management are actually involved in day-to-day operations, not just sitting in a boardroom somewhere else.
I think that's a perfect example of how they're moving beyond just making statements and providing real, tangible advice. They want to see real leadership, not just a figurehead in a distant office.
Right, it's about being present, engaged, and accountable. They're also saying it's vital to have strong internal governance with independent oversight.
Exactly. They want those non-executive directors to be actively challenging decisions, providing a critical eye, and making sure everything is being done with the customer's best interests in mind.
And of course, keeping a close eye on all those outsourced functions, agents, and distributors. That's crucial.
Couldn't agree more. It all comes back to accountability. The FCA is making it crystal clear that firms are responsible for what their partners do.
Oh, and let's not forget about keeping up with all those regulatory changes. They're coming fast and furious.
Yeah, the FCA wants firms to be proactive. They want them to jump into consultations, stay informed about what's coming down the pipeline, and prepare their leadership teams for the changes ahead. That proactive approach is a key part of good governance.
So we've got the FCA's vision for the payments world and their focus on strong governance. But there's another big piece of this puzzle we keep seeing, the consumer duty.
Oh yeah, the consumer duty. That's a big shift in how things work, and the FCA is serious about making sure it gets implemented. Like they even got a whole section on their website dedicated to it, full of reports and guidance.
It's definitely not something firms can just ignore. But what exactly does it mean? What does it look like in practice?
Well, the consumer duty pushes firms to go beyond just ticking boxes. It's about showing, with real evidence, that their products and services are actually helping customers.
So no more check-the-box mentality. It's about proving you're putting the customer first.
That's it. They want to see real proof that firms are putting customer interest first, all the time.
You know, one thing in the Consumer Duty Board reports caught my eye. They're expecting firms to have a Consumer Duty Board champion, someone who's specifically responsible for making this happen.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
It's interesting, right? It shows how seriously they're taking this. It's not just left to individual teams to figure out. They want someone at the top level making sure the firm is meeting its obligations.
So what does the FCA actually want to see for consumers? What outcomes are they looking for?
Well, they've got 4 main outcomes they're hoping for. First off, they want to make sure that products and services actually do what they're supposed to do, meet the needs of the people they're aimed at, and work properly.
Okay, so no more products designed to trick people or take advantage of them. What's the second one?
Number 2 is about making sure pricing is fair and transparent. They're really watching things like foreign exchange pricing clarity, which is a big deal for payment firms. The FCA wants to see customers getting a fair deal, no hidden fees or confusing pricing structures.
Transparency is key, especially in an industry that hasn't always been known for being upfront. What's the third outcome they're looking for?
The third one is about giving people clear, simple information that they can understand,
Right.
ditching the jargon and making things straightforward and accessible for everyone.
Sounds like a direct response to all that complex and often misleading stuff that's been a problem in financial services for years. All right, what's the last outcome on their list?
Last but not least, it's all about customer support. The FCA wants firms to have support channels that are easy to use and actually work, responding quickly, resolving issues fairly, and tailoring support to each person's needs.
So it's about making the whole experience positive from start to finish. But how can firms actually prove they're meeting these outcomes? It can't just be about good intentions, right?
That's where data comes in. The FCA expects firms to have solid data strategies. They want to see them using data to track customer outcomes and gather real evidence that they're meeting the requirements.
So no more just saying you're doing the right thing. You got to have the data to back it up.
You got it. The FCA wants to see the receipts. And what's interesting is that their recent review of payment firms showed a mixed bag. Some are doing well, but there's definitely room for improvement in a lot of areas.
It sounds like they're really using data to keep an eye on things. What about smaller firms? Do they have to meet the same standards as the big players?
Smaller firms can take a more tailored approach since they might not have the same resources as the big guys. But they still need to use data effectively to show they're delivering good outcomes for their customers.
So no one gets a free pass.
Nope. Everyone's got to make an effort to meet the spirit of the consumer duty, even if their approach is adjusted for their size and what they can do.
So we've got this whole picture of what the FCA wants from payment portfolio firms. But let's get real for a minute. What happens if firms don't actually do what they're supposed to? What are the consequences?
Well, the FCA's got a whole toolbox they can use, and they're not afraid to pull out the big guns if they have to. Let's just say not following the rules can get pretty unpleasant.
I bet. So walk us through it. What can the FCA actually do if a firm messes up?
One of the first things they might do is issue a public warning or censure. Basically, they call you out in public, which can really hurt a firm's reputation, makes it harder to attract customers and investors.
So it's not just about the money, it's about how people see you. A firm's credibility can really take a hit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When the FCA says something, people listen. And no one wants to be on their bad side. It can be hard to shake off that kind of reputation.
What else can they do? What are some of the other consequences?
They can hit firms with some pretty hefty fines. Like, we're talking millions of pounds, depending on how bad the breach was.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt. But can they go even further? Can they actually shut down a firm?
You bet they can. If it's a serious case and the FCA thinks a firm just shouldn't be operating anymore, they can take away their authorization. Basically, put them out of business.
So it's not just about warnings and fines. The FCA has real power, and they're willing to use it.
Right. They have to protect consumers and keep the whole financial system safe. They take that responsibility very seriously.
But it seems like they're also trying to encourage firms to do the right thing, you know? Be more proactive and work with them.
Definitely. They're really pushing self-reporting and fixing problems quickly. If a firm finds a breach themselves and takes steps to fix it, the consequences are probably going to be less severe.
So there's an incentive to be open and honest, even when it's tough.
Absolutely. The FCA gets that mistakes happen, but they want to see firms taking ownership and fixing things.
It all comes back to that emphasis on good governance and culture we talked about earlier. Firms need to create an environment where everyone's responsible for compliance and where potential problems are dealt with quickly.
Totally agree. It's about going beyond that check-the-box way of thinking and actually committing to doing the right thing for customers and for the industry as a whole.
Okay, so the stakes are high and the consequences are real. What's the main takeaway for firms? What do they really need to understand?
Compliance is not an option. It's got to be a part of everything a firm does. They need to take the FCA's priorities seriously and make them part of their business strategy.
It's about building a business that's built on trust and integrity, not just trying to get around the rules and avoid getting penalized.
Right. The FCA might seem demanding, but what they want is ultimately what's best for everyone in the long run, firms and consumers alike.
All right, so we've looked at the FCA's vision, their focus on governance, the ins and outs of the consumer duty, all that financial crime stuff. And what happens if firms don't comply? I think it's time to shift gears a bit and talk about what this all means for our listeners.
I agree. Let's get practical. How can firms actually take all of this and use it in their own operations?
Exactly. We've talked a lot about the theory, but the real question is, what can firms do to not just comply, but actually thrive in this changing landscape?
We'll dig into those questions in the last part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
All right, we're back, and it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty. We've gone through the FCA's vision for payment firms, all that good governance stuff, the consumer duty, and how financial crime fits in. But now, let's make it real. How does all this affect you, listening out there?
It's one thing to understand the rules, but putting them into practice, that's a whole different ballgame. It can feel like you're trying to hack your way through a jungle with dangers lurking everywhere.
Yeah, I can see that. So many things going on, and the rules keep changing, enough to make anyone dizzy.
For sure. That's why you need a plan, a
Yeah.
strategy. It's not just about reacting and checking boxes. It's about making compliance a core part of your business from the ground up.
So where do you even start? If you're running a payment firm, what questions should you be asking yourself after all this?
Well, I think you got to start by taking a good hard look in the mirror. Ask yourself some tough questions. How strong are our governance structures? Are they really up to the challenge? Do we really understand our customers and where things could go wrong? Are we using data to track outcomes and find ways to improve? And are our financial crime controls strong enough to keep up with the latest threats?
Those are some heavy questions. It sounds like it takes a real change in how you think, not just a few small adjustments.
Exactly. It's about building a culture where compliance is seen as a positive thing, not a chore or something you have to do. And in the long run, that can actually make you more competitive.
I totally get that. But I think a lot of firms might feel lost or overwhelmed by all of this. Where can they go for help?
Well, the good news is there's a whole network of resources and support out there, whether it's getting expert advice, investing in new tech, or even just talking to other firms and sharing best practices. There are lots of options.
That's a relief. You don't have to figure it all out on your own.
Right. And remember, compliance isn't just about avoiding fines, it's about building a business that's sustainable and that people can trust.
Couldn't agree more. It's about doing the right thing for your customers, protecting the whole financial system, and building a brand that people can believe in.
Exactly. And that's something worth working towards.
All right, so we've laid out the challenges and the opportunities, but let's give our listeners something concrete. One thing they can take away from this. If you had to pick one key step that firms should focus on, what would it be?
If I had to pick just one, I'd say take a good, long look at your data strategy. Are you collecting the right data? Analyzing it the right way? Are you using it to understand your business better and make real improvements?
Data really is the key to a good compliance program these days.
Yeah.
It's not just about showing the FCA you're compliant. It's about understanding your customers, your risks, and the opportunities out there.
Couldn't have put it better myself. And the things you can learn from data are incredibly valuable. You can meet the FCA's expectations and make your products and services better, improve the customer experience, and grow your business.
It's amazing how data can turn compliance from a burden into something that drives positive change.
Absolutely. And remember, building a strong compliance program is a journey. It's all about continuous improvement, learning, and adapting.
And the FCA, even with all their rules and regulations, can actually be a helpful resource for firms who want to do things the right way.
That's a good point. They're not just there to punish, they can actually help firms achieve their goals.
We've certainly covered a lot today. I hope this deep dive has helped you understand what the FCA expects from payment firms and given you some ideas on how to navigate this tricky and ever-changing world.
I think you summed it up perfectly. It's all about building a business based on trust and integrity.
Well said. And always remember, compliance isn't just about checking boxes. It's about making a better, safer, and more customer-focused payments world for everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.